All right, everybody, another conversation about the toughest places to play in college football because the new college football video game has ranked them. They've released the rankings. It comes out in a few weeks. Kind of a fun way to talk about this. But they've got Sanford Stadium, home of the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens, Georgia, at number 4 on its list. I have not seen Sanford Stadium, Georgia's home stadium, this high on any list, right? But the video game is putting some respect on Sanford Stadium's name. I think it's an interesting list. It's one where I've been to a good bit of these places that they're talking about in the top 25. I contextually know a good bit about some of the other places and roughly where they should be ranked. But let's talk about this again. Is Georgia a top 5 environment? Does Georgia have a top 5 home environment in college football? If you ask EA Sports College Football, then it's in the top 5. And I think that most people would disagree with that, even though the Dogs have won a lot of home games recently. We'll get to that number in just a second. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post. Make sure you're going to dogpost.com, checking out our newsletter, checking out all the deals we have going on over there for subscriptions, for magazines, all of that. Everything that you need to see is at dogpost.com, obviously the website version of this YouTube channel. So Georgia has the longest home winning streak in college football at 31 games in a row. Haven't lost a home game in a while. I think it's been since the 2019 season when they lost to South Carolina in what was an embarrassing overtime loss. Jake Fromm throws 3 interceptions to the same guy. Rodrigo Blankenship misses a really important field goal late in that game, and Georgia ends up losing an ugly one in overtime to the Gamecocks 6 years ago. All right, so Georgia hasn't lost a home game in 6 seasons. I believe it's Washington, the Washington Huskies, who have the second longest streak with about 20 games. Now, part of that is Georgia hasn't necessarily hosted as many huge matchups. Now, they have had Tennessee in. They've had Notre Dame in. They've had an Arkansas team that was top 10 at the time. They've had some really big matchups, but we know this season they'll have some really big ones. And if Georgia's environment really shows out this coming season when they host Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas at home, Georgia wins those games. People that are big-time college football people go to that. Maybe Georgia has an opportunity to move up on a lot of people's lists. Let's get to the actual EA list. We'll examine the top 10. 10, Michigan. 9, Oregon. 8, Oklahoma. 7, Florida. 6, Clemson. 5, Bama. 4, Georgia. 3, Ohio State. 2, Penn State. 1, LSU. So I consistently see LSU in the top 3. I pretty consistently see Penn State up there. I see Ohio State pretty high up there most of the time. Alabama pretty high up there. Florida pretty high up there. So some of these schools, it's pretty consistent that you see their names, their home stadiums, high up on the list. So out of the top 10, I've actually only been to Georgia, Bama, and that's it. Actually, I haven't been to any of the other environments. So from a firsthand experience, I can't talk about it. I know what I've been told. I've been told Penn State is pretty elite. I've been told LSU is arguably number 1, and they end up number 1 on a lot of people's lists. I've been told Florida's got a pretty great environment. I've been told Clemson's can be really great, right? Michigan, the Big House, Oregon, obviously the colors, the fanfare, people like it out there. Not quite as big of a stadium as a lot of these other ones, the Oregon Ducks. When you go outside the top 10, though, I'm seeing some schools where I've been to it, and I've been to some of these other places, and I'm like, okay, well, I think that you can make an argument that that's higher. Tennessee at 12, I think a lot of people would have them in their top 10, if not their top 6 or 7, right? I think that when you think about how loud it's really, especially at the beginning of the game, how loud it can get in Neyland Stadium, how that place shakes, the amount of people that it holds, the colors, the way they checker it out with the orange and the white. They do a good job up there, the song, right? Tennessee has a great environment. I'd argue it's higher than 12. Texas, I've been to Texas. They've got them at 13. They definitely have an argument for top 10. The fireworks, the fanfare. Again, another really big stadium. You could argue that's higher. Florida State at 14. I've heard some really good things about Florida State's environment. Heard good things about Wisconsin at 15. Here's a couple that I would slot higher on this list. Now, or like I said, I haven't been to all these places, but South Carolina at 16 and Auburn at 17, right? Look, Auburn is a really tough place to play. It's loud from start to finish in the games that I've been there. South Carolina, really loud, underrated environment. Maybe 16 is about where it belongs, but I'd slot Auburn a little bit higher. And they got Mississippi State at number 25. I'm going to be quite honest. I didn't think, and this is not, I guess I can't say without sounding a little negative, I didn't think there was anything really special about Mississippi State's environment with the Cowbells. It was a night game that I was out there for. They're hosting the number one, I think Georgia was number one at the time. It was the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs hosting the top team in the country. You'd think, obviously, there's part of you is like, you're probably going to lose this game. But the other part is, hey, look, this is a major matchup at our home stadium. And I just came away underwhelmed with what I thought I was going to experience at Davis Wade Stadium. So Georgia at number 4, kind of get back to talking about the Bulldogs. The biggest games the last few years at home, Ole Miss in 2023, that was, I believe it was a top 15 matchup. Georgia boat raced them. That was a big one. The crowd really showed up for that. In 2021, the crowd really showed up for that Arkansas game. That was a top 10 matchup at the time. It was the college game day was in town for Athens. It was a noon kickoff. And the combination of Georgia's legendary defense, right, and the crowd energy caused a lot of false starts early in that game. It caused a lot of issues for KJ Jefferson and that Arkansas offense. That was an impressive environment. The 2022 game between Georgia and Tennessee in Sanford Stadium, when that was the first week of the college football playoff rankings for that season, and Georgia was number 1 all year, and the Vols got ranked number 1 by the committee for that win they had over Alabama a couple weeks prior to that. So the Vols entered number 1. They had Ohio State at 2, and they put Georgia at 3. Georgia was number 1 in the AP poll, so it was number 1 AP versus number 1 college football playoff rankings. And Georgia's crowd stuck through the rain in the second half, stuck through what was a pretty big defensive game, which is not everyone's cup of tea. And the crowd was elite for that, and Georgia beat up on the Vols. In 2019, I don't know if I've been a part of a crowd that was excited for a football game as the Georgia crowd was for that Notre Dame matchup. That was so anticipated. College game days there all week. It's the fanfare, and it was a really special night for college football in terms of just being at an environment like that. Georgia's had some really special games. I don't know if it gets quite as loud as it does at Bryant-Denny Stadium or even at Neyland Stadium. Doesn't mean it's not as good of an environment. But like I said, this season, Georgia will have an opportunity to climb up people's lists. When they host Alabama in late September, that's going to be, at the time, the biggest home game probably in Georgia football history, in my opinion. I talked about that a little bit last week. That's an opportunity for Georgia's crowd to climb the ladder on this list. I think the following week not the following week, but later on in the season when they play Ole Miss in October, that's another chance to say, hey, if you're Georgia, they're going to try to beat them in a big way again. And then against Texas, show them, hey, we've got one of these environments too. So I think this is one of those seasons where Georgia's got 3 games where all eyes are going to be on the Dogs that weekend. In Sanford Stadium, they're going to play other top 10 schools probably multiple times this year. It's another example, and it's an opportunity for Georgia to climb up people's lists. But I think having them at 4, the EA College Football video game, that's the highest I've seen Sanford Stadium on these lists. Do you think that that's justified, or do you think the Dogs are not top 5? Let me know in the comments down below, and I appreciate you watching.